Going live. We're live! Sorry, I'm packing a lot into tonight, apparently. I just finished first Views Day, I guess I'm gonna call it. Views Day movie night. I did have an idea at one point of doing a regular blog, where I would do like a different type of entry each day of the week. I may get back around to doing that. I don't know that I have a lot of blogging in me. Blogging is a little bit easier for me, uh, but it's it's all a lot happening today. So I just finished watching Iron Man 3 for the first time, reacting live that you could play along with. Um, but this is the first day in the second week of a video each, like a live stream each day for a creative project. And if you're new to my channel or you've watched my channel before, I do a creative thing each month for 7 different categories of content, 8-ish. Um, and this, it's usually a book, a movie, a board game, a product or service, a taste test, a piece of artwork or music, and a video game. So like art and music, sort of like 2 categories. But so I'm kind of trying to do this year, starting New Year's. I'm trying to do a bit more of a um, challenge myself to create something, and in doing so, demonstrate how other people can also do these things. So, like last week was uh, starting a nonfiction book and took it from day 1 concept all the way out to day 7. Now it's really just kind of finishing up details, editing, and formatting. And then by the end of the month, hopefully, maybe the end of next month, at worst case, it should be up for sale. And so it's going from day 1 to sale with updates about it. But we've hit the point in that one where daily updates don't necessarily make sense. And I kind of had hoped, anyway, at this point, week 2 should be for video creation. So movies or a regular video programming, like episodes of a series, or in this case, what I thought would be fun to try to do, and maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not. We'll find out during the course of the week, but I want to try to do something in the realm of animation. Um, I'd like to see, um, but I mean, I'd like for the by the end of the week to have a video animation up, but I'm not sure how I want to do it. Like what the thing I was thinking about as I started to get ready to, why I chose animation is like I can shoot a video like this. That's You don't need a demo on how to do that. That's pretty straightforward. I could shoot a home movie, like an edited, clipped up, put together story sequence. And I thought about doing that, and I may do that in a future version of this. Um, but I'm not in a position where I can have a set, have other actors, and the build time required to do props is like I'd love to tinker around and build props. I don't think I'm going to do it this week. That takes a little more prep time to do. But animation, I create the sets, I create the characters, the costuming, the props with simple art. And so I feel like there's a way I could do an animation short this week. So I came up with the idea of doing an animation this week, and it may be like the book where I can script and do some of the artwork and get ready to get into the process this week. I may not be able to release it because I have to, finish the creation and editing. So it might be something I do at the end of the month or end of next month, worst case scenario. But um, so considering an animation for this month, I have to come up with an idea for it. And aside from coming up with the idea for it, I also have to figure out what kind of animation I want to do. Because, like, I could do like I thought about for like a brief idea I had was like maybe doing a puppetry kind of thing, like motion tracking points, um, and putting on markers on a chroma key of a suit that I can put up and have it track certain motions of my limbs. I don't know that I'm as familiar with the software as I need to be to get that to work, but more than that, there are a couple other ways to explore animation that I like. The drawn animations that you sometimes see on YouTube are oftentimes uh, I like some of them. There are some of them where it's more like a slideshow where somebody stops and their mouth is open and words come out, and then when their expression changes they move to this position, and yeah, it's that's doable, and it's actually really usable on a short time frame. There's also sort of like the stick figure combat animations that you see some people do. um, that's a little more, you want in between panels and you need to work on them and frame by frame by frame and frame do that. um, that that's a possibility to do with digital art or drawn art by hand and photographing them and essentially doing a flip book. Um, but there's also, I guess it's claymation or stop frame animation, where you sculpt the thing, shift it, swap out parts, take another picture, do it again and again and again. And then there's some of the techniques used for like South Park, where you use two-dimensional cutouts to build your characters and your set, and the interaction with those is uh, done sort of like the claymation or the stop frame animation. Um, some of the very, very earliest stop frame animations were done sort of like a stop frame meets a drawing style, which is very interesting, where you adjust the position of like puppetry, like a put together puppet. You just move the limbs a little bit, but you also kind of rebuild the scene each time you do. It's some really complicated stuff for the early days of animation. And then there's 3D digital animation, and there was something I was considering early on, doing sort of like a 6-bit character animation where I use a piece of software to build a, yeah, almost like scenes from a video game, but I take those scenes and I have the character uh, uh, actions relying on me hitting certain keys. And so it's like playing a video game, but the video game is a puppetry video game almost. And so it's a way of animating the acting scene in a way. Now that would require building the game um, for me to be using in that context. Um, it's sort of like a game that has no win um, scenario. It's a series of sets that when I move the character to the end of a set, it transfers over to the next scene. And um, each character may be switchable so that like I leave them. Well, I might. Oh, I don't know. Like if you have multiple characters moving, how do you do that? Oh, that would be tricky. But it's kind of an interesting idea, and I don't know if I can call that animation. I think at that point it really does become puppetry. So it would be a set, props, characters. The characters' motions are controlled by me pulling digital strings, and the voices would be me voice acting for them, which I'm not a voice actor, so it's going to be disappointing. Um, so, like, well, maybe it's not as hard as I'm making it out to be, because if I do that puppetry, there's no requirement for me to um, handle both acting positions, both puppets at the same time. I can record, say, like you walk into the grocery store, I can record the checkout person first, their half of the dialogue, their motions in that set, and then um, go back through that scene and record character two talking to the cashier. That I like this idea. I don't know how I would construct it. I have to build the sets, build the character models. I like the old designs of um, like that 8-bit or 16-bit video game characters. Um, and I can see bringing them into a scene. Yeah, I mean, there are two ways I can think to do this. Um, I can come up with a essentially a puppetry game where I can build different sets, drop them in, and have the dialogue or the interaction scenes recorded one half at one time and one half at another time. It seems like a complicated piece of software. Or I can I can build the sets, build the characters, act out a scene with one of the characters on that set, record it as a video, then act out the other half of the scene with another character, record that as a video, and then edit them together. That seems like it's probably the easier way to do this. So I may end up doing that. Now it comes down to the question of like, what's the story going to be about? And I don't imagine it's going to be a long one. A long animation is, That's something if you do like a 45-minute animation even, that's weeks, if not months worth of work. Now the technique I'm if I'm gonna use the computer animated, where I take the 16-bit characters or whatever and tell a story with them, it's easier than doing hand drawn or 3D animated or some of those other forms, but it's still not, I don't think, easy enough to do outside of a really, really big project. So I'm thinking it's going to be an animated short, like the stuff that happens at the beginning of Pixar movies. Um, so I think that's more in the realm of where I'm going to go with it. Now it's really a question of like, what's the animation? Because one of the possibilities for doing an animation this month for me was I might be able to do like an animation opener for my regular edited YouTube content here. And I might tinker with that, but like for me that's sort of like that could be a week's worth of work to do a stop motion opener for inspired content and then do a variation for each of the 7 categories of content that I do. It's possible to do that. Um, I feel like that's sort of cheating because it's not really creating a story or anything other than splashy openers for my channel. And I want to actually make creative content, not just something that's tacked on to something I'm already doing. Um, I feel like my area of interest for writing and creating, and it always happens. Like I did an exercise a few years ago of when I was doing some writing. I was like, I want to dabble in all sorts of genres. I want to explore and try things I've never tried before. So I tried a stage play, and it turned into a piece of science fiction. And it's science fiction stage play, but it's still science fiction. And I dabbled a little bit with a radio play that turned into science fiction. And I dabbled with trying to do a comic book script, and that turned into science fiction. It was meant to be like an anime, and it turned into a science fiction anime. And I tried to do a I'm trying like I distinctly remember at one point I tried to write a romance novel, and partway into it, there was a note that was written by somebody who wasn't born yet that arrived. Yeah, it was like some time travel weird sci-fi. Like it just it it's a thing that my mind draws back to. The speculative fiction, fantasy and science fiction are genres that my brain likes to play with because they're a genre of ideas and to a certain degree gimmicks. It's, I wrote a story some years ago when I found out like there's a scientific hypothesis, I guess, that was if you bored a tunnel through the earth from any 2 points on the surface of the earth and let an object fall from one point to another point, it would take the exact same amount of time to get from one side of it to the other, no matter if it was New York to LA or Hong Kong to London. The distance in the tunnel could be longer or shorter, but the distance and time that it takes to get through there was the same. Because if you're falling from New York to LA, you're following at a you're falling at a more gradual rate. Um, so like you start, you speed up, and you slow down as you get to the other side. The the rate of your travel equals a set amount of time. And if you go from Hong Kong to London, you're going to go faster at the rate of fall. Um, Now, it's a theory that requires perfect circumstances for that to happen in. So it would never work in the real world. You can't pass through the core of the earth and survive the heat and pressure in those environments. And you can't really build a tunnel that would survive those circumstances. And there's a air friction to be involved, and a, a whole lot of other little things to take into account that make it so that it's just a game looking at the statistical data of gravity, rate of fall, and acceleration and deceleration. Um, Mathematically, on paper, it works out. But so where I'm going with this ramble is that no matter what I do, my brain likes to play with those concepts. So I have a feeling instinctively that this is going to either lead in a direction that is science fiction or fantasy, which I mean I do like some fantasy stuff too. Um, and I've written some fantasy stories. But I was playing around not that long ago, looking up famous writers, and stumbled into some of the I guess you'd call them horror, or yeah, I can't think of what else you would call it, like horror fiction, like Stephen King, or what is it, Kuntz, or some of those other prolific writers of horror fiction. I usually like to go for the anthologies, so I don't know many of the names of people. Um, but like, oh, like a Lovecraft. That was one of the other ones. I think that's one of the ones that got me into contemplating writing some horror fiction. And I sort of did my weird geekiness aspect of this that I sometimes do. And I started to break down, like, okay, so what constitutes a horror versus a thriller versus a splatterpunk versus the different genres that can sometimes be confused for horror fiction. Like, what makes a what is it, Hannibal Lecter style story a thriller, detective catch 'em kind of story versus Carrie and Dolores Claiborne um, kind of fiction. I mean, where's the cutting lines on some of that? And so I started to like categorize, split up, and say like, okay, so if you look in these types of models, how do you break this model? How do you do something that refuses to be classified? And how do you define a category? Can you create a new category? Can you take this category and create an iconic one of those with a formula? Can you build a formula for doing horror fiction? And so one of the things I was doing with this was like I was just rapidly building this list of like pieces of ideas. and then starting to string pieces together in like a Lego playset and seeing like, can I build a car? Okay, can I build a house? Can I build a plane? Can I do this? Can I do that? What can I do with this? How can I mess with this? What can I do about this? And so I built a kind of a big list of, and then I did the usual geek out session where I pulled up lists of the most common phobias, different types of phobias, um, different categories of things to be afraid of. Are you afraid of vegetable, animals, minerals? Are you afraid of abstract concepts? Uh, there's a category of horror that's sort of like body horror, where like aspects of the human body are horrifying in some way. So like you might do something like the devil takes over somebody's hand. It's the idle hands story. If you did it in a way that wasn't comedic, um, or more intensely, like looking at a concept like alien hand syndrome, where you're you receive some form of brain damage that cuts the divide between sections of, cuts the connections between sections of your brain, and in cutting those connections, the halves of your brain become separate entities to a degree, and one has control over one hand and the other has control of the other hand. And so the part of you that's talking and interacting uses one hand, but the other hand does its own thing. And like that is sort of creepy. And it's really not hard to come up with an idea to make a creepy story out of that. Um, there are a couple other concepts that I built up in this list of horror fiction. So maybe it would be kind of fun to do a horror animation. And I'll go digging through that list of ideas I came up with a while back and see if I can find one that would do well for a quick short. Um, and animate it using computer game style art, like old video 16-bit, 8-bit character art or something like that. I don't know. It'd be interesting to try to do that. I think that's where I'm going to go with that. I have to dig up that list of the horror concepts. I think it would be. I think that's doable. So I'm gonna. Where is that file? Do I still have it on here somewhere? I think it's on this one. I have 3 broken computers and I'm just struggling with it right now. Um, so we've got the templates here. That's loosely categories. So like ghost stories, monsters, thrillers, weird fiction, dark fantasy, cosmic horror, and splatterpunk are categories, subcategories of horror. Okay, here's the list of fears. Oh, here's the a list of some of the, not in the same list as the list of fears, but below that was a collection of short ideas, and uh, uh, annoyingly, I wrote this months, maybe more than a year ago at this point. I can't remember when I wrote this, but in it is um, a script, an idea for a script about the horror, a story that um, deals with needing to be in silence. And I guess they did a movie like that not that long ago. And then, like, not 4 pitches later, is another idea for sight being the sense that is the danger to you. And they just did that with like the Bird Box thing. And I'm like, come on. If I don't do some of these soon, everybody's going to pick these things off and that's going to be it. So, I mean, yeah, I try not to think like that because like there's nothing wrong with writing something that's been written before. I'm not trying to write the end all and be all of a category. Star Wars is, includes dogfights from aerial combat movies and spaghetti western aspects, and Star Wars is still one of my favorite movies. It's not less because it took from those things, and so there's no reason why I can't do these kinds of things. It's just it feels like I don't want to do it so close to it having already happened by somebody else that it comes off as derivative. But like maybe it will be. It shouldn't bother me that much. But so now I've got my list here of like 15 skeletons on which I could maybe build a quick script in the next 24 hours. And then I really got to figure out how I'm going to do the digital artwork, build my character sets, build the sets, props, and then shoot them and then or record them and then edit it all together. It's doable. It seems like a workload right now. Especially since I'm doing like 17 other projects right now. I'm really doing too much right now, but I still want to kind of do this, and I think this is achievable. I will try to put the effort into doing this. Um, I need to get back into a work routine. There's so much going on that has disrupted my regular routine right now that I'm a little all over the place, but I think I can do this. And like I said, like I could do a lot of this week, even if I don't get it all done. I can do an update a week, a week after the next Tuesday. And if it's not done then, by the end of the month, I can't imagine it would take me more than a month of time to build an animation uh, this way. Um, Especially like even if I did like only an hour a day, I should be able to really pop something out here. So I think we've narrowed it down. I think we've hit the concept. So computer art, I guess we call it digital animation, horror, short. That, that seems like a good deal to me. That could work. So concept, what concept am I going to play with? There's a lot to look at. Did I pull that open? Yes, there we go. Silence. Well, that would be a short, simple, workable one. It's got a cast of one. um, that would I the scripting of that would be a little tricky, I think. Oh, claustrophobia might be a fun one to play with. Heights. Oh, the oh yeah, the buried alive one really hit me. Like that idea, that's the biggest skeleton of a story there. And it's oh man, that would be so I might do that. What else do I got? Uh, Falling. That's a mediocre one that needs some working on. Titan. Oh, spacewalk. The reverse of claustrophobia. That's what that is. That's like untethered falling through space. That's terrifying. Uh, That's a weird one. I don't think that it really falls in like I have one here for fear of light, and that one was like I was really trying to find a way to make that a story that's tellable, and it seems like a very ad hoc premise. I think I could do that better. And then what do we got? Sickness, uh, a plague, um, surgery, fears. I've got category here for the elements, mysticism, books. Like I didn't know there was a fear of books. That one is weird. Oh, and then like the usual animal fears, like snakes, spiders, bats, bees, mice, rats, ants, ravens, bears, dogs, those types of things. That one, I mean, that has potential, but it's a very kind of like there's not a lot of story to it. And maybe that's all right. Maybe as an animation, that's not a bad way to go. Where you do like the introduction of the character, the introduction of the setting, introduction to the animal monster, and the chase. And then however you want to end it, whether they get away or it comes after them further, or they trip and you close as it closes in on them. Like that's a possibility. And that's not bad for animation. It might actually be like it's one of the simpler forms to do because at that point all you have to do is script out like you build a map, you do a route of attempted escape, and you record the scenes for each part of the route and the trip and the locked door that they have to double back around and like they actually have to cross back and past the creature that's following chasing them. Like that's not too hard to do, but that is also something that it has to be done more cinematic, and I don't know that it could be done well using the 8-bit computer animation style. All right, so I'm going to look through some of these ideas and play with that a little bit. I think I've got some stuff to work with, and it'll be an interesting thing to see how this week goes. And, if it runs longer, see how the animation arrives at the end of the month. Now, I'm also one of the things I have to really figure out for this is at the end of the month, the inclination for me on this one is to do the animation as a um, just post it as a YouTube video because I want you guys to be able to see it. But the trick is with like the book or with a board game, the end goal is like you can buy the book on Amazon when I'm done with it. Or the board game is there's a website where you can go and order my board game once it's done. And they'll print on demand the board game for you. Um, a product and service would be I make them, I can sell them through a website or something like that. Uh, uh, music and art would be you can purchase my music on a store somewhere, or you can get a print of my art made into a poster through a website. Um, the taste tests and the videos produced are the two that are hardest to monetize that way and still get them accessible to people. Like, I suppose there are some sites where I could say, like, you can go, pay to download this animation. don't really want to do it that way though. Like if I'm gonna make a video, I want you guys to be able to see it. So I'm thinking of doing a Patreon page so that like people who liked it can support the project or something like that. I don't know. I still got to figure that one out, and I got to figure something similar out for the taste test videos that I do. But yeah, I think for right now we're at a good spot. We're about 40 minutes in. I'm surprised I filled that much of this time. I did go on a bit of a ramble about passing through the earth. I'm still getting the hang of this live stuff. Um, but yeah, I think we've got a decent idea that we can play with here. So a horror, computer animated, 8-bit video short. Yeah, I think that's doable. That'll be interesting to try to do. All right, well, I will. I guess I'll see you tomorrow around 9:30. I know I was a little late tonight because I was doing the recording of the Views Day night. I feel bad about that. I feel like I'm messing this up. And like I made the rules. Like I keep messing up the rules and getting it wrong and failing to abide by the rules, but I made them. I feel bad when I do that. So I will try to be better about tomorrow at 9:30. Um, and by then I should have a script picked out and uh, with a script, oh, well, I should have the idea picked out and the beginnings of the script that should give me enough information to start figuring out how to design the sets of the scenes and uh, any of the camera work that needs to be done, and then yeah, I should be able to start to flesh that out for day 3. We'll see where we are tomorrow at this time. I have a habit of biting off more than I can chew if I'm not careful. So let's just go with we've got the beginnings of an idea. See you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves.